BigID. So Peggy, an excellent topic today. I will let you introduce it as well as introduce your panelists. Thanks for your patience. It's been a great day today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, and hi, everyone. It's really great to be here today at DataVision. The topic for today's discussion is what the CDMC framework means for data governance practitioners. And for those of you that listen to Mike's hosted keynote panel session with the cloud service providers, I thought it would be a really great segue to continue that discussion with some of the folks that actually were leading the working groups that wrote the capabilities that's inside CDMC. So I'm happy to have Andrew and Sumanda join me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves and their title.
1,500 people registered, so I better than that guess we're anywhere from 300 to 500 people.
So Andrew?
Sure, thanks, Peggy. So as you can see on the screen, sorry, I've got some audio cutting over. Mute that.
I think, yeah.
Okay, looks like we're on mute now. Yeah, as you can see on the screen, head of data governance at Deutsche in the US. I got to participate in the CDMC working groups last year, mainly focused on data quality and data governance, and then playing a supporting role in a couple of others. Really looking forward to talking about it.
Great, thanks for being here today, Andrew, and Sumanda, please introduce yourself.
Peggy, thank you for the invite, and thanks EDM Council for organizing the DataVision sessions. This is Sumanda Basu from Societe Generale Americas. I was previously leading data governance and technology within Americas, and now transitioning into a new role to leading the data quality for Americas within Societe Generale. Thank you for being here, calling me.
Thanks, Sumanda. And just to remind everyone, this is meant to be an interactive discussion, so feel free at any point in time to utilize the chat and ask questions from today's panelists. So I won't really belabor the point on the benefits of cloud adoption with this CDMC framework, but really just wanted to emphasize the other benefits of consistent data capabilities, especially for organizations that are now either embarking on a cloud journey, they have multi-cloud solutions, they have hybrid solutions. The challenges that they face today is really the complexities around consistency around their data, enabling controls and standards across not only within their organization, but within their different cloud environments, and really being able to design frameworks that's meant for privacy, security, and metadata management. And earlier today, and if you've logged on to the EDM Council website, you've seen these 14 key controls for managing data risk, and they're bucketed into 6 capabilities, these 14 key controls that we'll be talking about in regards to risks and automation opportunities. And I think that's really what is really interesting, especially for those of you day-to-day, your role as a data management, data governance professional. What do you do next, right? You have these capabilities and control framework in place. How do you make sure that you're taking full advantage of this information? So let me just start with you, Andrew. Let's start with a general question here. Why is data governance so important for cloud management?
Yeah, it's a great foundational question. So the first question, I guess, is why is data governance important? And I think we'd probably all answer that it's important because you need to be comfortable and you need to be able to rely on the data that you have. And then you add on to that the cloud component. And just to almost sort of segue for a second, I look at the industry conversations I was having 2 to 3 years ago, and everyone had some kind of pilot, maybe a Snowflake pilot or something like that. And in the following couple of years, the large financial institutions I tend to talk to, everyone then had a strategy, right? So it's very rare now that you'll come across a large organization that doesn't have a sort of cloud first, hybrid cloud, some form of cloud related strategy. And I think what's really important as that journey was taking place, I was thinking, wow, we're all going to fight our way through this. We're all going to do the same level of learning and understanding. And that's where the CDMC came along. So I think the numbers were probably earlier in the deck, but 300 people, 100 organizations, a collective sort of many hours worth of effort. And that collaboration between financial services and then the big technology firms as well. So cloud is going to give us scale. The size of data that we have is not going to shrink over time. Every so often you get these, you read these articles and they'll say there's more information produced in the last minute than existed in the rest of humanity, something like that. So to key back into your question, Peggy, if you're scaling everything, data, platforms, the whole lot, if you have an inability to control that in a meaningful way, then how can you trust the information that you have?
Sumanda, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts as well as chairing several of the working groups. What are your thoughts on this as well? I mean, as organizations are moving more to the cloud environment, how does that affect the data strategy for chief data officers?
Yeah, exactly. I think, Andrew, you covered the data governance aspects very well. And, if I kind of draw from there, data governance is kind of important in any kind of environment, and cloud actually is more important because the lot more democratization is happening in cloud, and every department can probably contribute to management of data, governing of data, and need to kind of do it in a very, very consistent way. That's why data governance, so some centralized, some sort of policies and rules to ensure everybody works in unison, very consistent way is very important, number one. Second thing, the data strategy need to include governance even in a lot more than earlier. Because we have been, as a CDO, we have been considering governance, but some of the technology aspects that data bring in, for example, cloud. Cloud is a huge business initiative, technology initiative, but CDOs are very integral part of it now, and which was not a requirement 10 years ago. Now CDOs need to think about this. Analytics. It should be a very important part of strategy again, because that's where you can show the value very, very quickly. Data is a foundational component. Governance is a foundational requirement. But if you just want to show the value, you need to, as a CDO, you need to think about analytics and think about technology to show the value and take the things forward. So I would definitely talk about analytics and technology as one of the foundational components that CDOs need to care about, along with securities, along with data access. Those are important things. I think we'll be talking about it shortly.
I think that's a great segue, because certainly security access is one of the key capabilities. But let's really continue on and talk about specifically the capabilities. Andrew, please let everyone know which specific working group you led. I believe it was catalog classification. Can you talk about why that is a key component, a key capability, especially for organizations managing data in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, the main focus I had was data quality, data governance, and it's interesting you mentioned catalog, because everything comes back to that. One of the things I loved about working with these incredibly smart people from the big tech firms is I got to remove myself from some of our day-to-day challenges and say, right, what would I look for in the sort of magic fantasy world that is the cloud? So it was the ability to pose questions like, okay, I would like to have metadata tagging at an atomic data level so that I can capture lineage, data quality, controls, relationships, all the way through my data sets. Is that something we would do? How would we think about it? And from there, you ended up in these discussions, which were frankly tortuous, right? Because people cared about small details and you had to work through it in that way. But then you'd come back on to say catalog and you say, well, a lot of this will work if I can find my data in the first place. To find my data in the first place, I need the right metadata tagging. So that was the direction of travel. And I will say that probably the toughest thing I found, when you talk data ownership and you talk data quality, everybody has an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. You get onto some of the tougher parts of perhaps encryption, there you get specialist knowledge in place. But the advantage of having these topics where everyone had an opinion is that once you made it out the other side, you ended up with a really good product. And in this case, obviously, the product is the best practice principles that we defined.
Sumanda, what about you? Were there any instances or conversations that you've had during the working groups where it got hotly debated? Because I think Mike said, there are a lot of long meetings, and certainly with not only cloud providers, there were also industry data practitioners like yourself sitting in the room virtually. What were those conversations like? What type of discussions were really nitpicked upon in writing the CDMC?
I was kind of aligned with Andrew very strongly on this. I worked on catalog, data quality, and data sourcing, and I'm fortunate to share the stage with Andrew on this both catalog and quality. And I would talk about my experience with data sourcing. If you think about it, like at least 30 plus experts sitting in a room, and everybody probably is an authority on their own right, on merit, and discussing and arguing to build an industry standard on data sourcing. Like this include the sourcing, data consumption, data authorization, and automation of it, ensuring there is a provisioning of the data at the end. So that really gets hotly debated, and these include the technology partners, the cloud providers, and the banks and other financial organizations. They kind of bringing their wealth of knowledge and experience to build a set of standards. So many times there are multiple meetings, and just to bring a sub-capability to the working group level, or even to graduate out of working group to move to the review committee, or even multiple discussion within the review committee to move to advisory board, where it get the final stamp of approval. So from the timing perspective, by the time you start conceptualizing what to even discuss, to by the time it get approved and final editing, it takes probably around 4 to 5 months, if not more. And that's the kind of level of involvement each one of the contributors had in the whole journey. In fact, leads have more stake in it because they kind of drove it from the end-to-end basis. So I kind of really, enjoyed the discussion on the data sourcing, because data sourcing being so important, especially in the cloud scenario, because you don't even know where the data is coming from, because data is coming from all around. It could be from one of the on-prem sources, could be one of your data providers who is kind of hosting the data in somewhere else. And many times in the cloud, as we think about Snowflake, you don't really move the data from a place to place. You just provide the access based on your access rights. You get to work on it. So the authority and your access control become of paramount importance. So Peggy, back to you.
Actually, Peggy, sorry, just to maybe add on there, I think everyone's contribution comes from their own experience and frame of reference. And then what we had to do was make sure that we weren't taking a sort of unique example that was a challenge from an organization and delivering a solution for that example. You had to incorporate everyone's collective challenges and then come out with something that would be industry generic, but at the same time specific enough that it would be of genuine value and help to each organization taking on the framework.
And we actually have to keep it in a level so it does not becoming a mandate or a standard, but kept it somewhere between the principle and a standard. So it is not to a high level like a principle, and not to a implementable, because every organization is different, somewhere in between. So every organization could just pick it up and add its own details required so that it can be implemented readily within their org. So it was a tough challenge to balance both.
Well, actually, that's what I really liked about the framework. It had some ability to implement, because it talked about, for example, the controls. It talked about the risks, talked about potential business drivers, legacy challenges that would be there if it wasn't addressed, and also automation opportunities for each of these controls. Andrew, you mentioned that being on the data quality working group, I think everyone conceptually understands data quality, but you now add on this complexity of cloud data, and still trying to reconcile it with probably your master data and with other forms of your on-prem structured data. Let's deep dive into data quality. What are the really the specific cloud risks that need to be addressed, that is really prevalent to today's audience?
Yeah, I'll probably address it in two ways. So data quality, I guess we treated it more as an opportunity, right? So you're moving. Most organizations have some combination of legacy infrastructure and modern infrastructure, and it's a challenge to operate across all of them. When you're designing for the cloud, you get to focus on the world as it can be. So we treated that as really more as the opportunity. Where I think the challenge came in and started to bring in some of the other CDMC components was, well, in a cloud world, how are you managing control over where you're allowed to get access to data? If you're looking at regions, you're looking at regulatory compliance and so on. So that was interesting to me because I hadn't thought about it before, is where does this increased opportunity in turn lead to, threat is overstating it, but really a strong need to demonstrate control. And things like that, things like access to different data in different domains, and how do you manage that? And you're exposing this kind of power more deeply into the organization than you would in a legacy environment. Mm-hmm. Data quality itself, I think a lot of people have gone through the journey of the last couple of years where everyone started off very manual focused, and now most people have moved to a sort of machine learning based data interrogation, trend analysis over time, and so on. But you're still responding downstream to challenges created upstream. When we look at that cloud environment, the full conversation is, how do we prevent data quality issues entering into your ecosystem? How do you create a loop and feedback mechanism that's operating far more effectively right at the input end? And then how do you automate that as much as possible, so you're not having to scale up your workforce in a linear fashion, but instead you're leveraging these enhanced computational capabilities that you get through a cloud infrastructure.
Great. What about you, Sumanda? I'm sure that you had a lot of innovative ideas while working on these capabilities. What are your thoughts on some of the automation opportunities that you saw that were being proposed?
So one of the few automation opportunities, especially with respect to authoritative sourcing and distribution, is the automation of the provisioning. It's not that you cannot provision it when it's on-prem. It is very much possible, and the technologies are there. But with the cloud, it's become more important and become more easy, because when you start with the cloud, it comes with the capabilities to manage the data provider and subscriber contract, like I think you call data sourcing contract. And basically who is using the data for what purpose and when and how much. And you can basically, this information metadata kind of exist for the billing purpose. Every cloud providers probably have those information, and you have the capability to extend that to really track and monitor who is using the data for what purpose, and are you violating any of the contractual obligations you have with the data providers, or are you maintaining the contract as it is? Number one. Second thing, you can really track the usage of the sensitive information and it's how it moves or percolates through the environment much more easily. You can keep a track of the data movement. That's a number two. And overall, you have lot more transparency in the data usage and provisioning of the data when it is needed. So I would say there is innovations that is happening on the data usage and provisioning. And when you are talking of data strategy in various companies, we figured out that data access becoming a more and more hugely important issue by every business. Everybody want to get access to the data as quickly as they can, and cloud adoption and effective governance on the data sourcing can provide that much faster.
Great. Thanks, Sumanda. And we actually have a first audience question from Chris Bowers. Have elements on the CDMC been implemented in your business? I know this CDMC is fairly new, but what sort of wins or takeaways have you seen to date? And what do you expect the benefits to be in the future? So, great question. Andrew, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk sort of less to my own organization, although you can probably take, we've had a number of people contribute into it, and we hope to sort of benefit from it. One of the things I thought as I invested time in last year, will this become an exercise that we create a sort of 165 pages and then it doesn't get used? And what I found as an immediate indicator is that a lot of the consulting companies and a lot of the technology companies are either marking to market their own products against the CDMC, or they are offering consulting sort of inputs based on the CDMC. And that says a couple of things, I think, to all of us. It's number one, that people are independently validating what's being delivered and see it as a benefit. Out of that, we'll get standardized approaches, nomenclature and terminology that we can use to talk to each other about, ranging all the way from, if you hire someone with a CDMC certification, you get some sort of, you understand what level of capability that they should have in speaking the language that you want to speak. So, yeah, so I would say a number of those. It's too early to say from my own organization. I wouldn't speak on behalf of that anyway, to be honest. But it's those things I just mentioned really point to a sort of strong future.
Great. What are your thoughts, Sumanda?
Yeah, actually, very happy to have this question. In fact, we have started working on some of the annual refresh of strategy and the standards. We are actively looking at what the CDMC has, and certain areas we have incorporated the CDMC guidelines. So, and when you incorporate those suggestions in your strategy and standards, and that get effectively implemented in certain areas. And I actually know some other banks are also doing something very, very similar. So I think we are on the right path, and we will be seeing the result of better standardization and faster execution of the challenges, because we know many of the answers right now.
Great. So with that said, I know we only have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to talk about one of the technology partners that were part of the working group for BigID for EDM Council CDMC, and that is BigID. So I'm the Chief Data Officer for BigID, and certainly one of our capabilities involves around cataloging, classification, really being able to leverage all your data sources and data types, whether it's on the cloud or it's located on-prem, and being able to automate those data insights together in one data platform. And we do this through 4 different ways in our data foundation. We're able to build a virtual catalog of contextual information that brings together all organizations' data. We apply information sensitive classification directly on the data. We also do 2 other things around clustering and correlation. It's really powerful for security and for privacy use cases. And then on top of this foundation, BigID, we offer very specific applications for our data users and data steward teams and business users to take advantage of that data. For example, around privacy, we have a DSAR application. Protection, we have a remediation application. And then we have a whole suite of data governance applications that revolve around quality, stewardship, lineage, and retention. Now, going back to the original capabilities, there were, as I said, 6 components, 14 capabilities that were outlined in CDMC. And for those that have not actually read the entire document, I really recommend that. The actual control section is a little shorter, so I recommend starting with that first. But the capabilities of BigID really align to each of these components, whether it's around talking about cross-border data movement. You want to create policies that help monitor that movement of data. The second one around data cataloging, as Andrew and Sumanda talked about, building this data catalog is instrumental for your entire organization to discover and leverage data consistently. So being able to automate that data catalog is really important, especially for standardizing data understanding across your organization. Data security is, that's about monitoring your open access files, privacy compliance and security control. Those are all real key parts of the CDMC that all organizations should have a program around. And lastly, data quality, retention, and being able to build all that technical metadata for your lineage is all key. So I think we have one more minute. I think we can take one last question. This is really important. Sumanda, we talked about the fact that you're working with your, regulatory compliance counterparts. So how did a framework like CDMC help with these type of conversations with your business partners?
So, CDMC, where I work in a foreign bank, and our headquarters is in Paris, with a subsidiary in New York. So we have been working with our principal in Paris. So we had multiple sessions with them, and also the regular internal audits. We have I have presented this in many forums. There has been a lot of interest. We have shared it. We have been talking about it. And the way I kind of have been marketing it, because there are at least 300 experts worked on it, at least 100 hours on it. That means there is 30,000 hours of maturity built into it. So if any company is picking it up and trying to implement in the organizations, you are going to get almost 30,000 hours worth of maturity by just reading it and implementing it. It saves you a lot of time. And it has been very helpful having the conversation with our LOD2 and LOD3 partners in implementation and acceptance of the principles, so that we can implement various standards both in the technology and the data space.
Thank you. And Andrew, any last words before I wrap it up?
I would just say to everyone, take a read for yourself. If this is the first time you've heard about it, go dip into the actual document. I think it's free to all. You can get it through the EDM Council's website.
With that said, I do encourage everyone to take a look at the EDM Council website, download the CDMC. It is free, and it's a great read. And think about, then go back within your organization and think about where you are in terms of the maturity of each of these capabilities, and work out a plan to how to improve that maturity level. Certainly, we are all available to help as needed, along with the EDM Council. So next up on today's DataVision conference, we will be taking a 10-minute break, after which you can return to the main stage. The EDM Council will highlight some of the upcoming key initiatives that are coming about, especially with DCAM, more CDMC, ESG data, OKGs, data ROI, women data professionals, and our first raffle winner for the EDMC training. So please take a little bit of break and come back to the main stage. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of today's conference.